Hello once again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is part 6, the finale of my 6-part video, and this is number 935, and it's all about the Manson micro lathes. I hope you have watched the earlier 5 parts so that you know what this is all about. I've covered the little Manson lathe, and this is the Manson duo lathe. So let's see what this is all about. Pause your video if you would like to read this short article on the Manson duo lathe, and this came from Vintage Machinery. Now, I've talked an awful lot about this little lathe. This is the original Manson, and there again are 5 parts to that video, and I did some cutting. I wasn't quite satisfied with it. I'm not used to these small lathes, but I think I've said about all I can say about this little one. And we'll turn our attention now to the slightly larger, probably about 20% larger Manson duo lathe. And this belongs in the personal collection of Mr. John Krug, and he is the originator and founder of Lost Creek Machine. He is now retired, but he's an avid collector and auction goer, and this is of course part of his permanent collection. The other one is for sale on the Lost Creek website. However, this is December of 2023, and it may well be gone here in the near future. I would like to point out some of the differences between these two lathes before I set this one aside. Again, about 20% bigger, but the swing on this lathe, the duo lathe, is 3 inches. Whereas the swing on the smaller one is 2 inches, and I talked about that earlier. Now let me show you the specifications for these two machines. That's been covered in recent videos as well. And again, thanks to these folks. So here's the specifications for the two machines so that you can compare them if you're interested. This is the smaller machine, and here's the duo lathe, slightly larger. The hermaphrodite caliper is set for 1.5 inches, and we compare it to the smaller one. You can see that the difference is considerable. This machine is slightly longer and just a little bit higher, but you can see much of the change in the dimensions is right in here, rather down in the base. Also, look at the difference in the 2 tailstocks here. This one is very high, not so high. Also, they've built up the cross slide considerably. I really like this very light green or grayish color on the original one here, but they decided to just buff up the aluminum case on the larger one, and it's very pretty as well, although somewhat corroded and tarnished over the years. Patina is what I was trying to think of. The switch on the smaller Manson lathe is an on and off switch. This switch is a forward and reverse. There is no on and off switch. However, they have this one has a bigger motor and it's variable speed, and they used my mom's Singer sewing machine foot pedal, so it's variable speed. The tailstocks are considerably different. Notice that this one operates with a cam operated type of clamp to clamp it onto the bed, just cut like my closing lathe and many others, whereas this one uses a more traditional type of clamp to clamp it to the bed. Now that's not the only difference, so I think I'll take these tailstocks off and explain a little bit more about them, if you can take it. Also, I would like you to notice here that the width right here, I guess I already said that, but maybe you can tell a little bit better from the back side here. The hand wheels on the two are about the same as are the quills, but I think the comparison here is rather dramatic. As you can see, this is a one-piece tailstock. It cannot be offset. However, this is a two-piece tailstock. It can be offset for tapers, much like the Atlas closing and virtually all larger lathes are constructed. And from this angle, let's compare them. I know I'm probably spending too much time on this. Boy, they put the slit considerably farther back. Remember that this clamp here is broken off. But what I really wanted to show you here is the offset. So if we want to offset the tailstock, I can't imagine why, you would unclamp from both sides and just move it over. I don't believe that there's a little adjusting screw, so maybe it's the old bagosh method. I'm not sure. That again is the clamp. And as far as I can tell, the two beds are identical in length and size. They probably use the same pattern. The two spindles are not the same. This is a threaded spindle on the smaller one, 7/16 20, and this spindle holds these tiny little WW collets, and there is no thread, and therefore virtually none of the accessories in the accessory kit will work or can be used other than perhaps the little chucks and the dogs. So I will not be able to demonstrate or make any cuts with the dual lathe because there are absolutely no accessories with it other than the tiny collet that is in the spindle now, and I put a piece of 1/32 rod in there. Actually, it's a piece of wire just to demonstrate how small that is, and I can't imagine working on something that small. And looking from the headstock end here, the diameter of the bore of the smaller lathe is only 3/16, whereas this one is considerably larger at 5/16, and because of that it can accommodate the drawbar, the larger drawbar, which would be used in conjunction with these WW collets. Now, why the drawbar is so long and why it is threaded in both ends, I have no idea, but I suppose maybe it was just a spare thread if you ruined this one and could cut it off. That's what I'm deducing. And as you know, with the lathes that you have at home, the diameter of the spindle bore is really a big deal, because with the little South Bend and Atlas lathes, you're stuck with a relatively small bore of approximately 7/8. That's very limiting. The smaller lathe uses a tiny little center, tapered, and I'm not sure the taper number. It's certainly not a Morse, but look at how much larger that bore is, and I don't know what type of center was meant to be used in here. I have no pictures of the accessory pack that might have come with this machine. But another interesting thing to note, remember that this machine has oil-light bearings that can be oiled from this little oil hole, and they're flange type bearings which are also thrust bearings, so something like that. That's not the exact one. But this lathe uses ball bearings, and you can see the end of the race, I think, and probably even read the number. So that was a great improvement, and as you can see, that causes the entire headstock to be much larger and more bulbous. Is there such a word as bulbous? I suppose that some type of adapter could be made to fit into the collet here and hold the chuck. Again, I'm not sure what type of chuck they sold with this machine because there is none. Someone with excellent eyesight ground a tiny little cutoff tool for this at one time. Remember that the tool is only 1/8 inch square, so that's pretty tiny. The louvered end covers are not the same at all, so they had to make a separate die. Think of the expense of that. And this one is screwed on with two tiny screws. This one just simply clips on, as you can see here. However, many years ago, probably Alibi Ike was still in office, someone broke this little nub. So we would need duct tape to hold that on, wouldn't we? You will remember that this machine has a tiny little shaded pole motor and a set of pulleys that allows you 2 speeds. Now, from what I read about this one, it said that it had back gears, but they must have made different models because there are no back gears in this one for extra speeds. Notice that the fan is outboard instead of on the inboard like this one, and there is only a pulley on the top and the bottom with 1 groove and a small round almost O-ring type of belt. And again, this is a variable speed type, almost a sewing machine motor. I found a picture on the internet showing a variation of the duo lathe. In fact, this is the variation that has the back gear. So notice here this little plunger for the back gear, and that there are 2 belts and extra pulleys here to give you a variety of speeds, plus the thing has a variable speed motor. Here's a close-up of the back gear mechanism. I'm not sure exactly how this works, but I believe this little clip here can be either pushed in or pulled out to engage the back gear. There is tremendous corrosion on the bottom of this aluminum die casting, as you can see. A lot of pitting, and I'm deducing that this was possibly stored someplace on something wet over the year, maybe a windowsill or something like that, that caused that, and maybe it was setting on another type of metal, causing electrolysis because of the dissimilar metals. And a lot of corrosion down here at the bottom. Now, I'm not going to clean this one up because I do not intend to use it, but this wouldn't clean up anyway because it is corroded severely. So have a good look at that before I put the cover back on. That's about the slowest speed. Wow, that really hums along at full speed, doesn't it? And I do not know what the RPM range is. Perhaps it's in the manual. When I originally planned this video, I had no intention of comparing the two like I'm doing now. But since I'm unable to actually do any cutting on this one, I'm going to show you the differences, and I am amazed at how many differences and improvements that there are. And this one was made in the early 50s as opposed to the late 40s for this one. But if you look at the little collar on the crossfeed on the big one here, you can see that there are graduations. Now there's no numbers, but there are graduations. And I have no intentions of determining how many thousandths that is, but it's probably the same screw that they used in this machine. And remember, I did use a dial indicator, and there are no graduations on this tiny little dial here, which isn't really a dial at all when you think about it, but notice that this is smaller than in diameter than this one. And they would have been wise in making the diameter even larger. The larger, the better. As I started to play around with this machine, I found out that the carriage here is very, very tight. And in fact, when you go back and forth, can you see from this angle that it's actually cocking a little bit when I change direction? So I thought there must be an adjustment for that. Well, I'm not going to adjust it because it's John's, but as I examined it more closely and carefully, I realized that there is a tiny little set of gibs here on this piece. I'll zoom in and there are the 3 adjustment screws. No doubt they need adjustment. And you can see how much more simple this is on the other machine, and this is made of stainless steel. And I think that these holes here are slotted a little bit so that you can take up for wear, as if there'd ever be any wear. So let's take a closer look at this. So, can you see the little gib right here? That can be pushed up against the side of the bed here by these three little screws, 1, 2, 3. And as on the other machine, there's a tiny little gib right here for the cross slide, and it appears to be adjustable on this one. Not appears, it is adjustable, and there is no adjustment on this one. All of these little details that I'm pointing out here must have been extremely expensive. Let's have a look at the bowels of these machines. Now, you've seen this before. This is the small machine. Again, a shaded pole motor, 1 speed with the fan facing the tailstock. Very clean here, no corrosion whatsoever. Very simple wiring because it's simply an on and off switch. Little toggle switch. And on the dual lathe, a much larger motor. And the motor is held in with these 2 screws. Again, corrosion here, tremendous corrosion. And the wiring much more complicated because, in fact, it's a reversing switch. And the actual switch is over here. Let's reverse it. I haven't checked to see if that works. And it does not. Let's try that again. Now let's see if it reverses. It's just a 2-way switch. And no, it does not work in reverse, but that doesn't mean it's the motor's fault. I would say that this is not the original controller, because I did see pictures of a controller for these machines on the internet and it looked considerably different. So I'm not saying this didn't come with it, but you know, it's a different color. I really think this is off of a Singer sewing machine, although I see no marks or manufacturer on it whatsoever. Well, who cares? Before I show you this, I thought I wanted to make sure that the carriage lock is loose, and it is. But look at the rocking motion now on the entire carriage when I go from forward to reverse. Can you see how the whole thing is moving? So adjustments are necessary, but I believe I'll leave that up to John. I have the feed lever engaged, so take a look as I apply power. This seems to work a little bit better than the other machine. But again, no reverse. That simply turns it off. Notice, if you will, that the hand wheel on the smaller machine is much smaller in diameter, but in fact, this is a hand wheel for the drawbar, so that it was how you would do your tightening, and it needs to be a little larger, doesn't it? So, with the workpiece being in the collet here, all 1/32 of it, you would tighten it down by, well, you'd have to hold on to the spindle here. There is no way to lock it, and then you would tighten it. And getting back to those little ball bearings, there is no external way to lubricate them, and I would think that the grease or oil at almost 80 years old would be pretty dry or sticky. This is a 1948 picture of the dual lathe. Now notice the differences here. A much smaller hand wheel. It's equipped with a faceplate. I cannot see how it is held on. And the tailstock has quite a long quill on it. I do not know the purpose of that, but apparently there are many minor variations of this machine over its very short lifetime. Well, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video and the other 5 videos. It's a 6-part series, you know, on these beautiful miniature micro lathes belonging to Lost Creek Machinery. Get over there if you get a chance. They're good guys. But I'm sorry that I could not cut any metal with this, but I don't have the proper accessories, as mentioned many times. To me, these are a little too small to use, certainly in my shop, but if you're a jeweler or a model maker using tiny little wires instead of rods, you would find it useful. And of course, you could have your entire machine shop on a table in the corner of your bedroom or something like that, if your wife would tolerate it. So I'm so glad I had a chance to do this. There's probably only a few of these in the entire world left, maybe 100 or something. I doubt that they made more than a couple thousand according to the serial numbers that I showed you, I think, in part 1. So leave me a thumbs up and a comment and so on, and I hope you enjoy this video and my entire channel. And I'll see you next time, or maybe I'll see you next year at Lost Creek Machine. This is Mr. Pete saying so long for now. Now there will be plenty of still pictures at the end and maybe a few other clips and so on, outtakes. I'm not sure what I have until I start editing. And I'll, again, see you next time. Thanks for watching. This sheet is the original yellowed faded instructions for use and care of the Manson lathe. This was supplied with the machine in 1949. It won't all fit into the picture here, so I will scan down so you can read the rest if you desire. Also still pictures at the end. There's an interesting article and pictures on the internet, and that's where I got this. And across the screen, I will give them credit and tell you where you can go if you would like to read this.